Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. The phone rang at exactly 3:47 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I remember the time because I had been staring at the kitchen clock, counting the minutes until I could reasonably pour myself a glass of wine without feeling guilty about drinking before evening. 3 weeks had passed since Darius's memorial service, and I was still moving through each day as if underwater, everything muffled and unreal. Mrs. Patterson, this is Mr. Leonard Henderson from Peaceful Rest Crematorium. His voice carried an odd tremor that tightened something in my chest. I need to speak with you about your husband's arrangements. Could you possibly come in today? Is there a problem with the ashes? I thought we discussed that I was not ready to collect them yet. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I think it would be better if we spoke in person. This is rather unusual, he answered. 20 minutes later, I sat across from him in his sterile office, surrounded by pamphlets about grief and counseling. He kept adjusting his tie, a nervous habit that reminded me of Darius when he was about to deliver bad news about our finances. The irony of thinking of my supposedly dead husband while sitting in a funeral home did not escape me. Mrs. Patterson, I have been in this business for 32 years, and I have never encountered anything like this. He opened a manila folder with hands that did not quite stop trembling. When we went to complete the cremation process for your husband, we discovered that the casket was empty. Completely empty, except for this. He slid a folded piece of paper across the desk. My name was written on the outside in Darius's distinctive handwriting, the same confident script I had seen on grocery lists and birthday cards for 15 years. The paper felt ordinary under my fingers, but touching it was like gripping a live wire. I do not understand, I whispered, though part of me already did. There was no body in that casket, he said gently. Someone placed this note where your husband should have been. I unfolded the paper. The blue ink was unmistakable, the brand Darius always kept in his shirt pocket. The words swam, then steadied. My darling Tiffany, by the time you read this, Simone will be convinced I am dead and buried. The grief will consume her for months, giving us the perfect cover to start over. I have already transferred the money from our joint accounts, and once Mother's house officially becomes mine through inheritance, we will have everything we need for our new beginning. Simone never paid attention to our finances anyway. She will not suspect that the life insurance money and property sales will fund our fresh start. Let her mourn the man she thought she knew while we build the life we deserve. Forever yours, Darius Patterson. The office seemed to tilt. Every sentence landed like a blow. Darius had not died in that car accident. He had orchestrated the entire thing while I arranged his funeral and accepted casseroles from neighbors. Are you all right? Should I call someone? Mr. Henderson asked, his voice distant. I remembered the closed casket, how his dental partner, Dr. Malik Williams, had insisted the injuries were too severe for viewing. I thought of Tiffany, his 28-year-old secretary, with the practiced smile and the way she touched his arm when she thought no one saw. She had stood at the funeral, dabbing her eyes and accepting condolences for a boss she deemed wonderful. The car accident, I managed. The police report mentioned extensive damage. Yes, he said carefully. The vehicle was destroyed, but it appears your husband was not in it when it crashed. The full scope of Darius's deception crystallized. He had staged his death. Let me plan everything, and watch me grieve while he hid with Tiffany. Every tear and sleepless night had been part of his design. But as the shock ebbed, something colder began to replace it. I read the note again, this time attending to different details. His casual contempt for my intelligence, his assumption I would never notice our finances, his confidence I would accept his death and move on while he enjoyed the fruits of our 15-year marriage with another woman. He had underestimated me completely. You said Mother's house would officially become his through inheritance, I said. When did Darius's mother pass? Evelyn Patterson died 6 months ago, he replied, checking the file. The estate should have been settled by now. 6 months. He had been planning this for at least that long, perhaps longer. While I cared for his dying mother, bringing soup, sitting by her bed, he calculated how to use her death to vanish. The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. What happens now? I asked. We should contact the authorities. This appears to be fraud. Insurance fraud certainly, and possibly others. I nodded slowly. but my mind was already moving elsewhere. Legally, Darius was dead. His death certificate was filed. Social Security had been notified. Insurance companies had begun their procedures. I was officially his widow, and, therefore, legally entitled to everything he owned, including Evelyn's house. I had strong reason to believe that was where he and Tiffany were hiding. "Should I call the police?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "I need time to understand the full scope of what he has done." I tucked the note into my purse, the weight of it transforming from shock to ammunition. Darius thought he had outsmarted me. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The next morning, I dressed in the same black dress I had worn to his memorial service. But the woman in the mirror was not the fragile widow people expected. I was an actress preparing for the most important performance of my life. And I was a Black American woman who understood exactly how to navigate systems that were not designed to protect me. Our family lawyer's office occupied the second floor of an old American brick building downtown, the same place where Darius and I had signed our wills 5 years earlier. Anthony Caldwell, who had handled our matters for over a decade, guided me to a leather chair with genuine concern. "Some days are harder than others," I said, dabbing my eyes. "Settling Darius's affairs feels overwhelming." "That is why I am here," he said, opening a thick folder labeled with Darius's name. "We need to transfer property deeds, update account ownership, and ensure you have access to everything you are entitled to as his widow." I listened with focused attention, memorizing every detail. For the first time, I saw our finances in full. I learned about 3 rental properties in neighboring counties, investments he had never mentioned. He acquired these over the past few years, Anthony explained. The rental income should provide steady support. And his investment accounts? I asked evenly. Several accounts with different firms. Some show recent activity. Money moved shortly before the accident, he said, pausing delicately. He had been preparing his escape, but in his arrogance, he had left a paper trail that now led directly to me. There is also his mother's estate, Anthony continued. Evelyn's house and remaining assets transferred to Darius 6 months ago, which means they now belong to you. I have not been there since her funeral, I said carefully. It must be sitting empty. The utility companies show active service, he said, frowning. Someone has been maintaining the property. Perhaps Darius arranged a caretaker. A caretaker indeed. My caretaker. I left the office with a clear inventory of assets and a legal foundation beneath my feet. Darius's carefully plotted escape had delivered his entire financial world into my hands. My next stop was the dental office. Dr. Williams greeted me with practiced sympathy. "Simone, how thoughtful of you to stop by. We are all still processing Darius's loss." "I wanted to thank Tiffany for her support," I said, watching his expression shift. "Is she in today?" "She requested extended leave. She said losing Darius was particularly difficult given how closely they worked. She may not return. Too many memories," he said carefully. Of course, memories of an affair. She had burned her bridges, convinced their new life would be permanent. That afternoon, I drove past Evelyn's house, the modest American 2-story on a quiet street lined with oaks. Fresh tire tracks in the driveway, curtains that had not been there during Evelyn's final months. A small garden someone had been tending. Their hideaway looked serene, ordinary, and completely mine. I watched from my car. A shadow moved in an upstairs window. Someone was home. They believed they were safe and unseen. I smiled. The next morning, I called Secure Home Solutions, a local company with excellent reviews and a reputation for discretion. "I recently inherited my mother-in-law's house," I said in a weary tone. "I need it secured. Please change all the locks and install a comprehensive security system with remote access." Within 24 hours, I had surveillance coverage of every entryway and key access to every door. The installation team worked in the afternoon hours when, based on my observation, Darius and Tiffany usually left for errands. That evening, I opened the app. At about 8:30, headlights swept across the front camera. Tiffany's sedan pulled into the driveway. Darius tried the front door with his old key. Nothing. He tried again, jiggling the handle, his frustration visible even in the night vision grain. They moved to the back door, then to windows, testing each one. Finally, Tiffany pulled out her phone, likely calling a locksmith. Darius stood with his hands on his hips, staring at a house that would no longer admit him. locked out of his mother's home by his legally empowered widow. Phase 2 began with the city's building inspection department. I have inherited property, I explained. I want to ensure everything is up to code before I decide whether to rent or sell. We scheduled electrical, plumbing, and structural inspections over the next week. Through the cameras, I watched Darius and Tiffany scramble each time the doorbell rang. They hid dishes, medications, and personal items, then slipped out the back while the inspectors walked the perimeter. The pattern repeated with each visit. Their sanctuary turned into a stage for their disappearing acts. My next calls were to the utility companies. I am settling my mother-in-law's estate, I said to each representative. Evelyn Patterson passed away 6 months ago, and my husband died recently. I am the surviving daughter-in-law and the property owner. Please suspend service for now. By Wednesday afternoon, the house had no electricity, water, or gas. Through the cameras, I watched Darius flip light switches and Tiffany twist faucets to no avail. They lit candles at dusk and used flashlights to navigate a darkness that mirrored their dwindling options. I imagined the conversations with utility companies, the accounts suspended at the owner's request, the owner being me. On Friday, I called the most relentless real estate agent in town, Denise Thornton. I have an inherited property. I need to sell quickly, I said. Please list it by Monday and start showings immediately. She agreed without hesitation. The for sale sign went up Tuesday morning. Darius discovered it during a tentative step onto the sidewalk. He stared at the sign as if willing it to vanish. That afternoon, Tiffany paced the living room, gesturing sharply. Through the camera's silent eye, I watched the argument bloom. Showings began Thursday. A young couple toured the house, admiring the light in the dining room, peeking into closets, and discussing paint colors, completely unaware that 2 people were hiding in the basement utility room, holding their breath. More showings followed. More hiding. More strain. I made a measured call to county code enforcement. I'm concerned about my inherited property, I told Officer Jackson. I think someone may be living there illegally, and I am worried about liability. She scheduled an inspection and documented the evidence. Recent tire tracks, fresh cigarette butts, a tended vegetable garden, and trash set out with old address labels. A violation notice appeared on the door 2 days later. I also contacted the health department, expressing concern about potential unsanitary conditions in an unoccupied property. Inspector Bryant conducted a check, adding official scrutiny to the drumbeat of pressure. Every knock might be another inspection, another record, another step toward exposure. Then I dismantled Darius's finances. I called every credit card company's bereavement department to report his death. Cards canceled. Accounts locked for estate procedures. I moved to the banks. As his widow, with the death certificate in hand, I transferred accounts into estate management under my control. Checking, savings, even his business expense account. The cellular phone company was next. Mr. Patterson's line will be terminated immediately, the representative confirmed. I pictured Darius trying to make calls and discovering his phone was dead. No way to restore utilities. No way to maintain the digital lifelines modern life demands. Utility companies began flagging suspicious attempts to restore service by inconsistent callers. Tiffany tried to set up accounts in her name, but with no established credit at the address and questions about her connection to the property, she hit walls. Darius, using borrowed phones and false names, claimed to be a caretaker. His lies unraveled when records showed only one owner, me. My confidence grew. I built spreadsheets and timelines, tracking every action and response. The domestic competence Darius had always relied on, managing schedules, coordinating services, keeping our household running, became the engine of a quiet, relentless campaign. Word spread through our small American town, not because I bragged, but because neighbors talk. I mentioned a squatter problem to a few key people. Soon, Mrs. Regina Johnson from next door walked her dog past the house twice daily, noting plates and patterns. The mail carrier, Calvin, paid closer attention to forwarding requests. Teenagers occasionally lingered across the street, hoping for a glimpse of the mystery they had heard about. Darius and Tiffany's every move was observed by an informal watch of people who respected me and my ownership. The cameras told the rest. Their conversations grew tense. Their movements snapped and stuttered with paranoia. Romantic escape curdled into survival. The call came at 7:23 on a Thursday evening, 3 months and 2 days after the crematorium visit. An unfamiliar number. "Simone, please do not hang up," Darius said. Hearing his voice after months of watching him in silence was like stepping into icy water. He sounded older, thinner at the edges. "We need to talk. There are complications with Mother's house. I think there has been a misunderstanding." "I'm sorry," I said evenly. "You must have the wrong number. My husband is dead. Listen, things about the accident did not happen the way people think. I can explain if you will just listen." I let him talk. His words carried the helpless energy of a man out of options. "The house. There's been a mistake with the utilities. There's a for sale sign that should not be there. Someone is scheduling inspections and causing problems for the people taking care of the property." "Arrangements for what?" I asked, hearing the silence stretch while he tried to talk his way around a crime without admitting it. Finally, he whispered, "Simone, whatever you think you know, we can work this out. But you have to stop the sale and turn the utilities back on. These people are in a difficult situation." I decided to end the pretense. "Darius, I know exactly what happened. I know about your fake death. I know about Tiffany. I know about the note you left in an empty casket promising her a fresh start funded by my grief. And I know you are both living illegally in my house. The house I inherited when you legally died." The silence turned heavy, as if even the line understood the stakes. "How did you?" "The crematorium director called me months ago," I said. "Your love letter to Tiffany was informative. Did you truly think you could stage your death, and I would remain the grieving widow forever?" "This is not what you think," he said, breath hitching. "Tiffany and I are squatting in my house without permission while you're legally dead and she is unemployed," I said. "I know exactly what this is. What you do not understand is what I have done about it." I listed the actions methodically: the security cameras, the changed locks, the suspended utilities, the closed bank accounts, the canceled credit cards, the terminated phone, the code enforcement violations, the health department inspections, the real estate listing. With each item, his breath grew ragged. "You cannot do this," he said. "Those accounts, those properties, half of that is mine. You are dead, Darius. Dead people do not own property. Dead people do not have rights. You made sure of that when you filed your own death certificate. You are destroying everything we built," he said, panic peeking through. "No," I said. "You destroyed it when you decided to fake your death and steal our assets to fund your affair. I am simply making sure you stay dead." In the background, Tiffany's voice rose, sharp with panic. "What does she mean we cannot access the accounts? You said we had money saved." "Not now, Tiffany," he snapped, and she snapped right back. "You said your mother left you money. You said we would be secure." Their argument escalated, months of pressure exploding into accusation and disbelief. "Here's what will happen," I said, cutting through it. "You have 48 hours to remove yourselves and all your belongings from my property. After that, I will call the police to report trespassers. We have nowhere else to go," he said. "Tiffany lost her job, and I cannot." "You cannot get a job, open a bank account, or rent an apartment," I said. "Of course you cannot. You are legally dead. You made yourself a ghost. Ghosts do not get to live in the real world." I ended the call. My hands were steady when I set the phone down. The evening light faded outside the kitchen window, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was stepping into brightness rather than away from it. The footage from Friday night delivered exactly what I expected. At 2:17 in the morning, Tiffany's sedan pulled up one final time. They moved like shadows, loading their meager belongings with desperate efficiency. 3 months earlier, they had moved in like owners. Now they fled like squatters. Darius paused for one last look at the house before sinking into the passenger seat. His posture slumped in defeat. Tiffany drove away, posture rigid with anger. They disappeared at 2:43, and I never saw them again. The silence that followed on my screens felt profound. For 4 months, those cameras had shown me their arguments, their anxiety, their dwindling hope. Now the rooms were still. The hallways were quiet. The house was truly mine. I did not sell. Denise removed the listing at my request. Instead, I renovated. 6 weeks later, fresh paint glowed on smooth walls. New flooring brightened every room. Updated fixtures and a modernized kitchen erased any trace of their occupation. The master bedroom became an airy space unburdened by deceit. The The small tended garden remained, but with new plants, mine. My first tenant, a young teacher named Amani, fell in love with the house immediately. The rental income alone was more than enough to support a comfortable life. But every month when I received her payment, I took a quiet breath and recognized the deeper satisfaction. The place that had been intended as Darius's refuge had become my foundation. Neighbors noticed the transformation. "The way you handled everything is remarkable," Mrs. Johnson told me at the grocery store. "Managing an inherited property while grieving, and you solved that problem so efficiently." Down the street, Calvin nodded from his mail truck. "You handled it through the right channels. You documented everything. That is how it is done." Their respect felt different from the polite sympathy I had received as Darius's widow. This was recognition of competence, strategy, and resolve. People saw me clearly. They saw a Black American woman who had been underestimated and had refused to remain so. Looking back 6 months later, I understood that immediate punishment would not have satisfied me the way this did. Picking up the phone that first day and calling the police would have produced arrests and prosecutions. It would have been swift. It would not have taught Darius what I needed him to learn. Instead, he lived for months with uncertainty and fear. The same uncertainty and fear he had left me with. He learned what it meant to have no control, no resources, no safety net. He learned that the woman he dismissed as helpless could systematically dismantle his world. I had started as a wife who managed details while her husband made the important decisions. His betrayal forced me to become the decision maker, and I discovered I was very good at it. The same skills that kept our household running, planning, coordinating, anticipating, proved formidable when used to protect what was mine. Darius had wanted to kill his old life and start fresh. In the end, he succeeded in only one regard. He made me new. He was somewhere out there living like a ghost, while I lived fully as myself. The woman he tried to break had become stronger than the woman he married. That was justice enough. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.